In tonight's Dateline Defense, politics and foreign policy. Both are taking center stage in the race for the White House, especially on the Republican side. Where do the candidates stand on key issues? For answers, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider, Molly O'Toole, politics reporter for Defense One. Molly, during the latest debate, Republican presidential hopefuls were asked numerous questions about their plans for the Middle East, ISIS, and the U.S. military. Were there any in-depth answers?
Not particularly. A lot of what they focused on, they talked about how they would approach the relationship with Russia, for example. We've seen Russia taking some pretty aggressive actions. They kind of split the gamut between would we talk to Putin, would we not talk to Putin, but didn't really get into any specifics about how they would counter Russian aggression. Similar with the Iran deal, it was throw out the deal on the first day, don't throw out the deal on the first day, but no real specifics as to how they would move forward with either implementing that plan or establishing a different sort of framework as an alternative. Similar with boots on the ground in the fight against the Islamic State. In fact, all the candidates really shied away from giving any sort of specific number, such as Senator Lindsey Graham has given out, and he was at the quote-unquote kids table debate. He said 20,000 U.S. troops could be sent in as part of a coalition. So most candidates stayed away from specifics there. So we're still not really seeing a lot of specific policy pronouncements coming from the candidates, mostly just criticisms of the Obama administration's approach thus far.
Molly, I think you're exactly right, but at some point, if not already now, the public's going to get hungry for some details. Now, the debates also highlighted different opinions. The usually hawkish GOP had some dissenters in Senator Rand Paul and Governor John Kasich. Which candidates so far, from what you've heard, have a good balance in dealing with ISIS, Iraq, and Syria?
Well, most of them seem to be sort of picking and choosing. So in terms of balance, it's a little hard to say. I thought that Ohio Governor Kasich's approach seems to be somewhat measured in saying, look, we do need to be engaging with these quote-unquote bad actors when it comes to finding a solution towards some of these problems. At the same time, we need to recognize the role that U.S. leadership can play and how that's backed up by the military. So he had some, I guess, in terms of who is striking that balance. I thought that he said a few things toward that regard in the debate, but most others seem to be picking and choosing, not really balanced.
Kasich's message, I'm afraid to say, is getting lost with all these bigger personalities that are around him. Now let's talk about the fight against ISIS. The U.S. has been working to train and equip Syrian fighters to battle the terrorists on the ground. Of that first graduating class of 54 soldiers, only 9 are actually fighting, 18 are missing in action, and 1 is confirmed dead. What happened to the others?
So General Austin, who's the commander of Central Command, who's really charged with the fight against the Islamic State, he really shocked senators recently when he said only 4 or 5 fighters remained in the fight in Syria from that first class of 54. Now, since then, the Pentagon said 5 more had joined, that 14 were still in Syria fighting, but they'd abandoned the program. As you said, 18 were missing in action. 1 was believed to have been kidnapped by an al-Qaeda affiliate. Another was believed to have been killed. Now, since then, the Pentagon announced that 70 more fighters had graduated from this program and entered Syria. But the results have been pretty disappointing so far. They were supposed to have trained 3,000 by the end of this year, 5,400 by May 2016. So the administration has acknowledged that there have been a lot of setbacks and that they're looking into reforms, ways that they can make this program more effective. But they're coming under a lot of fire, and their serious strategy on the whole because of these disappointing results so far.
Molly, the numbers don't bode very well for the training program, but amid another review, the Pentagon says that there have been so many problems. How are they measuring success here?
Well, the way that the administration is citing success so far is they're pointing to ground gained, particularly by Kurdish fighters. They've seen some success in other parts of Syria. They're talking about sort of back and forth gains with Iraqi security forces in the Iraq theater. But it's very difficult for them to sort of point to clear measures of success when there is so much back and forth. It really seems like more of a stalemated fight, which is actually what Chairman outgoing chairman, Martin Dempsey, recently said. So it's difficult for them to point to signs of progress. They'll talk about ground gained, about the number of fighters, both in Iraq and Syria, that the U.S. is supporting or training. They talk about the air campaign that's really been the central focus of the U.S. strategy so far, and how that's forced the Islamic State to operate in a different way. But it's hard to see the fight in both Iraq and in Syria as anything other than a stalemate at this point. So they're really
Molly, let me ask you
this.
this. Let me ask you this, Molly. The Pentagon's Inspector General is investigating the Defense Intelligence Agency for manipulating reports on ISIS to make the mission seem more successful. Now we see issues with its Syrian training program. Is the administration's plan to fight and defeat this group working?
Well, that's what people are calling into question. I think a lot of people are particularly troubled by the reports that the defense, that the office that's part of the Department of Defense that does this analysis, these intelligence assessments, that their work may have been interfered with by some of the commanders who are overseeing this fight. That's been very troubling for people as they're trying to get a straight answer as to whether the strategy is working. And when you don't have a clear intelligence assessment, or one that you're not concerned has been tampered with, then it's more difficult to make that claim or trust that claim from the administration. So,
Molly, real quick,
yeah.
before we're out of time, let's get an update on Russia. The White House has confirmed Vladimir Putin is building a forward operating base in Syria to bolster President Assad. How will Putin's presence in the area impact the U.S. strategy there?
Well, it certainly complicates things to the extent that the administration has said there is no military solution to Syria. The main focus of their strategy towards Syria has been diplomatic, has been working towards the removal of Bashar al-Assad, the president who they say can't be part of the future of Syria. Now, if Russia is now getting involved militarily to shore up Assad, that really only prolongs this civil war in Syria and the U.S. involvement there, because it's likely protracting the conflict, making it more difficult to get Assad to step down now that he's being propped up by Russia. It also makes it very complicated when Russia is operating in the air, and so are U.S. and coalition forces, to try and deconflict that area as they both pursue sort of different goals in Syria.
Keep an eye on it. Molly O'Toole, good to get your insight. Politics reporter for Defense One. Thanks again, Molly.
Thanks.